I think I think we're good. I think in the future I kind of need to play this cool. Like, oh yeah, of course we're live. Of course the technology is working as we normally would have expected it to. But it is great to be with you here today, back in the Sales Lab. I'm David Praymer here, founder and chief sales scientist of Cerebral Selling, and this is actually a really fun and interesting topic that I'm keen to explore with you today, which is this concept of, are your calls to action scaring your customers away? And like, when you think, like, what does that mean, like scaring your customers away? Well, I'll tell you this story. I was speaking, by the way, if you're watching this live, feel free to, drop a comment. If you have a question, by all means, please do that. If you're watching this in the replay, sorry, but you can still send me a note if you like. So here's like a little story. I was talking to a client of mine the other day, and, we were talking about the power of video when it comes to doing really good discovery with our customers and getting them to open up to us. And, that'll be a whole other Sales Lab Live. That's a whole other conversation. I actually have a bunch of content on that on my YouTube channel. But, he was telling me, he's like, and kind of the thesis was doing more video will help you and your customers kind of have better conversations. It'll help your customers open up, feel more comfortable talking to you. And he was saying, like, David, I don't know, man, like, I've been using video for the last, like, X number of years, and, I can't get this thing to go. Like, I can't figure out, no one's responding to me. I'm trying to be engaging. I'm doing this stuff over video. And I said, hey, look, I have no recourse. I have no answer for you. But can you send me some examples of some of the videos that you're doing for your customers, just so I can get a sense of, like what are you saying? And I watched these videos, and he was, a fine, personable guy. But I watched these videos, and it was immediately clear to me why he wasn't getting any response from his customers. And it had to do with what he was asking his customers for. And these were kind of just prospecting outreach messages, right? Like trying to get their customers' attention. What he was actually asking for was scaring his customers away. And I want you to kind of think about this. I like using examples that are kind of a little bit abstracted from the sales world, which is like, let's say that you and I met at a party, and maybe we had a quick conversation, we hit it off. And then, the next day I send you an email or a text or something, and I say, hey, we met. Remember, the other day, yesterday at Jason's party, and it was great to talk. Hey, listen, how would you feel about maybe, next week, we go to Vegas for the weekend, and then maybe, after a few months of dating, like we could maybe elope, get married, have a few kids. We can name one Jack, because I've always loved the name Jack. And, we could live in like a house in the suburbs and like roll together. How does that sound? Right? Of course, you would look at that and you would say, well, that's ridiculous, right? Like, no, why would anyone ever agree to that? But the reality is that oftentimes as sellers, the kinds of things that we ask our customers to do, and especially when we're talking about kind of outbound prospecting, can be equally scary, right? We're asking them to do something big, something that they may not be committed to do, something that might be too kind of soon, kind of given the nature of a relationship. But of course, the things that we're able to ask our customers for will change over time as we get into kind of these deeper relationships with them. Now, what I want to do is I kind of want to talk more about the former today, meaning like, how do we get our customers' attention, and how do we ask them for a call to action? How do we position a call to action that's going to get them to take that next step that we want them to? We'll talk about, kind of once the client's warm, what kind of next steps work there as well. So that's what we're going to talk about today. Sorry, I forgot the title slide. That's what we're going to talk about today in the Sales Lab. Now, if you want a little bit more on this topic and kind of some of the things we're going to go into, you can check out some related tips in my book, page 175 in Mindful Discovery. It's called The Simple Approach to Get Your Customers to Open Up. I also talk about this a little bit in this article called The Hidden Force Accidentally Driving Your Prospects Away. And the idea behind this concept is relatively straightforward. When we ask our customers for something that's like too big, too much, or makes them feel like their ability to choose freely is being restricted, they're going to resist. And again, this is a concept I talk a ton about in my book. It's a concept, it's a psychological principle known as reactance. And reactance is, by definition, the intrinsic desire to push back or resist when we perceive that our ability to choose freely is being restricted. Now, I'm gonna come back to like, what does this have to do with calls to action? But like, when you think about, like, look at what's happening. First of all, like, you want to know, like, a great example of reactance? Look at what's happening in society today with, now we're kind of filming this hopefully at the end of the, the tail end of the pandemic, hopefully as we kind of, start to kind of, curtail some of these public health restrictions, but we're living in the world of like masking, right? And no one today is objecting, for example, to you wearing, your seatbelt in a car. Like we require people to wear seatbelts in cars. We didn't always require that. It wasn't always the law to wear seatbelts in your cars. Now it is, right? And it's now like a normal thing. But masking is a new thing. And while people may have decided to wear masks because of their own, personal desire to wear masks and be healthy and protect people, as soon as we start telling people they have to do it, there's this resistance, right? Because we're telling them. And the same thing happens when you get a call to action from a seller. So for example, one of the examples I give in the book is when you get, let's say I'm reaching out to a prospect and I want to say, hey, I'm laying out my value proposition. Hey, it's David from Cerebral Selling. We help B2B high growth technology companies, execute with science and empathy, whatever your value proposition is. Okay. We're not going to go into the great ways of positioning what it is you do. That's that's a bigger story for another time. But after I've given my pitch, the best pitch I can, I'm going to ask you for something. And the question is, what am I going to ask you for? Now, the question is, if I say, for example, hey, I've shown you all this value. How about we connect next week, Wednesday at 2:30 p.m. for a 30-minute discovery call? Right? Now, you'd think as the seller, kind of the wisdom behind that kind of call to action is, I'm going to make this really easy for my customer. All they have to do is say no, or sorry, say yes. All they have to do is say yes, and then all of a sudden, boom, like the calendar invite is hurtling towards them, and everything is going to be simple and super easy and taken care of. I'm going to do the calendar invite. I've already positioned what the thing is going to be, and I'm going to make it really simple. All they have to do is say yes. But what actually happens in the mind of your customer is this sense of reactance, right? They're like, hold on a second. Think about what's going on in their mind. They're thinking, who the hell is this person? And why would I agree to your timeline, to your next steps, your specific time? Hey, look, even if I was kind of interested, maybe I'm busy at that time. Or maybe because you're trying to force me into that time slot, maybe I want to resist and I want to say, I'm busy next week. How about, the week after? So there's all of this psychology that takes place in the mind of your customer. And if you ask for something too specific, they're going to just become immediately resistant and most likely just completely ghost on you, like this sales rep that I spoke to very recently. He's like, yeah, no one's getting back to me. Like, of course no one's getting back to you. Like, after I watched the video, you're really asking for something big here. Like, you're basically telling them that you would like to conduct discovery on them for half an hour in this session, and you've added kind of, no value, and you kind of seem a little aggressive sometimes in these videos, right? So we're asking for something very, very specific. And what's actually quite interesting is that there is some really good data. I love data. I love the science. There's some really good data from Gong that talks about this. And I'm going to show this to you. Okay, so the folks at Gong, I'm a big fan of the folks at Gong just because they do a lot of this kind of science and research based content. And they looked at cold outreach attempts, right, and calls to action for prospects, right? And so what they did was they said, okay, hey, look, we got 300,000 emails that we've looked at, over 300,000, based on the call to action. And we were going to deem success as booking a meeting with this customer within 10 days, right? If we booked a meeting with this customer within 10 days, then the call to action was successful. Now, before I kind of show you this data, I want to kind of position, there's kind of, let's call them two macro kind of calls to action. The first call to action is something that's very specific, right? So, hey, why don't you jump on this webinar next Wednesday at 2 p.m.? Why don't you jump on this meeting with me? We're going to talk for 30 seconds. Again, very specific. We're going to go to Vegas. We're going to get married. We're going to do all these kinds of things. And that's kind of bucket A. Bucket B, or kind of, CTA B, is what's referred to as an interest-based call to action, right? And an interest-based calls to action is just very simple. Are you interested, right? Yes or no. It's we met at Jason's party. We seem to hit it up. Are you interested in going out with me next week? I don't even know what we would do, right? But are you interested? And I'm asking you to take this very, very small step and just say are you interested? And in the case of, sales outreach, that interest could be something very, very simple. Hey, are you interested in learning more? Are you interested in continuing the conversation? It doesn't even have to be something big, right? Are you interested in what I have to say? So what did the folks at Gong find? They found that interest-based calls to action had double the conversion rates of this very specific calls to action. And then there was kind of these kind of wishy-washy, very open-ended calls to action. We're going to ignore that for a second. But again, you can feel free to, take a look at the research. The link is right there. But again, the difference between specific calls to action where the customer might feel like their ability to choose freely is being restricted has half the conversion rate of the interest-based calls to action. So again, as sellers, like why do we try to kind of go for go for broke when we with these CTAs? It's because we're subconsciously maybe we are trying to corner the customer. Maybe we are trying to kind of yes, make it easier for them, but we're trying to be like very, very specific. I think it's actually the same gene that salespeople have where they feel the need to unleash the beast as far as their pitch goes in the first 30 seconds of the narrative. It's like, I'm cold calling someone. I say, hey, Kevin, and I see Kevin, you're on the live stream here. So welcome, Kevin. So I say like, hey, Kevin, are you, sorry. So I might say like, hey, Kevin, it's David from Cerebral Selling. Hey, are you interested in learning more about what we do? And, we can meet next week at, this time and this date and all this kind of stuff, like very, very specific. And we ask these very specific calls to action, but more specifically, when we describe what we do, Kevin, I'm going to go overboard and say, oh yeah, like we're a firm that we do A, B, and C. And we provide this platform and we have this value and that value and these customers and that customers. And I'm like loading the bus with this whole big narrative at the hopes that maybe, something sticks. And before I know it, I've been talking for like a minute, not letting you get a word in edgewise. I think it's the same gene that when salespeople kind of, they do the calls to action, we think we need to be very specific because we don't want to let the customer kind of, wiggle around in this. Now, so that's like the take home message, right? And again, like I use this all the time. I've used this in the past. I use this all the time now. Like getting the customer, first of all, you have to prove value, right? So you can't just be like, oh, we're a platform that helps people save money when they shop. Would you like to meet next week, Tuesday at 3 p.m. for a 4-hour discovery? You can't just it can't just be like a generic pitch, right? You have to showcase the value of why that person would want to take that next step. But if you've done a good job of messaging, and I have a ton of messaging content on my blog, YouTube channel, my book, but if you've done a good job of messaging and describing what you do, so you've done a really good job of building up the pain of the message, and then you ask them for something that's like very simple, right? Like, are you interested? Right? That is when it comes to that kind of initial interaction with the customer, the way to go. Now, what's interesting, and I do want to kind of point this out, and this is the beauty and the nuance of selling, right? Is that trend doesn't stick all the way through the sales cycle. Like imagine this, okay? So now imagine we're in kind of a different situation here where we've dated. We've gone on a number of dates already, gone on 3, 4, 5 dates, and the relationship is going good, right? It would be weird after date number 5 to say, so hey, are you interested in maybe going out like on a date number 6? Like, are you interested? Right? Like, if it was going well, you would look at me kind of the side eye and be like, what do you mean interest? Yeah, like we're dating. Like this is good. Like, so in that case, the specific call to action actually works better, right? So let's say it's our 5th, 6th date. I'm saying, oh my gosh, we had so much fun, doing A, B, and C. Like, what do you say next weekend? I think I can get tickets to this hot play in town. Like, what do you say? Like, we go check that out. Maybe go for a walk in the park in the afternoon, right? Like, that's something very, very specific. But interestingly, I'll show you the data here. Interestingly, once the prospect is warm, those specific calls to action actually do better, right? They do better. And why? Because you're already interested, right? The client is already warm. And so at that point, I make it easy for you to take that next step, right? So it's like if you're involved in interaction with your customers, right? And you're talking about, a pricing, you're already the selected vendor, you kind of have overcome a bunch of the objections. You've now, like, you're chatting with the leadership team and you're doing legal and IT reviews and all that kind of stuff. It would be weird for you to go back to the customer and say, like, so are you still interested in moving forward? Like, no. Okay, we're moving forward here, okay? Like, then it pays to be prescriptive about your next steps and what you want the customer to do. So again, and by the way, on the prescriptive front, I have a bunch of content on my blog. So if you check it out, there's a blog post called 3 Ways to Be More Prescriptive in Your Selling Motion. But the idea here, again, is that when it comes to calls to action, you want to pick the calls to action that will resonate most with your customer, not scare them off, right? But that are appropriate for the point in the sales cycle that you're at, right? So thinking about, how you can architect your calls to action, again, at the very beginning, which I think is what most salespeople have trouble with, is architecting like a really good pitch, followed by like a very good, but very unassuming, interest-based call to action. So Jen, welcome, Jen. I see here you got a comment. You have a question for cold outreach. If I'm on my third or fourth email, do you suggest adapting the "Are you interested" CTA? If so, how would you suggest modifying it to navigate my prospecting cadence? So, Jen, I'm not sure if you're referring to, like, for example, if it's your third or fourth email, right? I'm going to make the assumption here that it's your third or fourth email and the customer is not yet engaged, right? Versus like it's your third or fourth email and everything is going good so far. So if you're on your third or fourth email and your customer has not yet engaged, again, one of the questions that I kind of have, because we as salespeople hate it when our customers, okay, Jen, okay, we're right there, we're on the same wavelength. So as salespeople, we hate it when our customers ghost on us, right? Like that's the worst, right? And so I have a couple thoughts around your question. Number one would be to take a step back and think about, okay, like what were steps, 1 to 3 or 1 and 2? Like, what did you ask for? Like, is there a problem where we're kind of getting to this third or fourth email and we're not even getting any response, right? Even if the response is just to say, hey, tell me no. And there's lots of reasons why customers ghost on us. Of course, they can be busy, right? It could be our fault, right? Like maybe we're not positioning the value of our service correctly. Maybe we're reaching out to the wrong person. Like there could be all sorts of issues there. But I think it's actually, fair at some point in your cadence to basically say, hey, you know what? Like if this ain't working out, if there's no interest, just tell me no. Like that's actually also, by the way, that is the antidote to reactance. I talk a lot about this in my practice and my training, is that like if you all of a sudden feel like the pressure's off, then you're more likely to kind of acquiesce. It's like, for example, when you walk into a retail store and you're thumbing through the merchandise and a salesperson says, oh, hello, ma'am, welcome to the store. Is there something I can help you find? For most people, they're going to be like, no, like I'm good, right? Because if I say yes, I'm giving you consent to do all your sleazy sales stuff to me, which I don't want. So, that's a problem. However, what they actually do in these retail stores is they say, hey, ma'am, welcome to the store. If you have, is there anything I can help you find? And if you just want to browse, hey, look, that's good. That's good too, right? Like you're free to browse. At that point, you might actually feel comfortable telling me that you actually need my help with something, and why? Because I gave you permission to say no. I gave you permission to say no. It's okay. Like I gave you permission to say no. You're not feeling the pressure from me. Like you can browse if you want, but now I've created this like safe space. So we often do that in the third, fourth, fifth, seventh, eighth, ninth message when we're not getting anywhere. And I basically say like, hey, Jen, so I know like I've sent you a bunch of these notes and it doesn't sound like you're interested in moving forward. I'm happy to close out your file. Just give me the heads up. Like the last thing I want to do is keep bothering you if there's no interest. Did I lose you here? Right. And again, there's kind of like some science with kind of starting with the negative, like I'm going for the no, as kind of Chris Voss says, going for the no, or you kind of come back and you're like, oh, no, I'm still interested, right? But this idea of an interest-based or kind of like a binary yes or no call to action as you're kind of moving through emails 3, 4, 5, 6, and you're not getting a response, I think that's a very fair way to go to basically just, say, like, hey, look, I don't want to keep bothering you here. I like that idea of, it's like, are you interested in moving forward? Are you interested in having me stop reaching out to you? I think that's very, very reasonable. Look, there's a lot, and thank you for the question, Jen, and thank you, Kevin. There's a lot to be said here for, cadences and like, what am I actually saying when I do the outreach? Oftentimes, I found this in my practice, my experience, when we're not getting responses. And by the way, sales is tough. So the reality is you're probably going to, even the best seller is going to, strike out a whole bunch of times, is that if we're not getting the response, if we're not getting the engagement, right? Even little things like, when people come to me and they say, hey, David, we need negotiation training because our reps are giving away 30% discounts all the time. We can trace a lot of that back to what's actually going on initially, early on, in the sales process as well, right? Because of like what we're saying and like our tone and like the length of the emails. And there's a whole lot of nuance wrapped up in that. Today, I'm just focusing on just that call to action, like that interest-based call to action, like something really, really simple, right? And sometimes I'll even do that, like in my outreach, where someone will, like there's someone who I might be engaging with, and I might just say, before I send you a whole bunch of stuff, are you interested in some help? Like if I sent you a whole bunch of, free links and, links to downloads and resources that were totally free and ungated, would you be interested? And I could automatically just send those to the customer because, the thing is low. It's like a low risk call to action. But what do? Like I ask for permission first because the person's going to be more engaged. And when they say yes, right, they're more receptive to what I have to say. Again, like an interest base, like a binary yes or no to something that's very, very small versus the binary yes or no to something that's very, very big. Do you want to do this like very, very specific and sometimes scary thing? I would also say if you're doing this over video, be mindful of your tone as well. Like if you come off in your video with a tone of being like very aggressive and like, very forward with the customer, that can be off-putting as well. So just be chill, interest-based, tease the value up front and get them to take that next step with you. So that's our Sales Lab Live for today. Thank you everyone here for joining. I hope you enjoyed this session and I look forward to seeing you back next week in the Sales Lab. Talk to you soon, everyone.